Very good. Okay, the Torah portion this week is Behar B'chukosai, and let's talk a little bit about Behar B'chukosai. And it is Pardes, so we try to glean from Pshat, which is a simple meaning of Torah. Remez are the hints that the Torah provides. Drush is how we can expound on the Torah Talmudically. Sod are the secrets, the mystical secrets embedded in Torah. And today, I feel like as we are in the immediate aftermath of Lag BaOmer, and we celebrated the Yartzeit, the anniversary of the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai yesterday, celebrated, thank God, safely by hundreds of thousands of Jews in Meron, at the gravesite of Rashbi. I feel it is appropriate to perhaps emphasize a little bit the mystical component today, out of respect for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Moshe, it was good to see you for just a second there. So I do hope to add
Likewise, Rabbi.
Thank you, to focus on a mystical element of the Torah portion. Let me share the screen and we'll go to the Parsha text. And at the end today, I'd like to show a video. I feel like things are getting a little bit boring, so let me throw in a video today just to capture people's attention. Just a moment, let's share the screen, and here we are. Very good. Okay, so the how do I video? There you go. All right. So let's go to the beginning of the Parsha, Torah portion of Bahar. And the Torah portion begins with the words Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe Bahar Sinai Lamor. God spoke to Moshe at Har Sinai Lamor, and the Rashi comments one of the classic quotes of the Talmud, which is often used in other settings. This first line is borrowed from many settings. Basically, in English, you have the remember as a child, I don't know if it's still used. What does that have to do with? What does one thing have to do with another? What does that have to do with the price of rice in China, right? Or that. So this is the Hebrew equivalent of that term is Ma inyan Shmita Eitzel Har Sinai. What is the connection between Shmita and Har Sinai? In other words, the pasuk begins by saying, this is what God said to Moses at Har Sinai, and then it goes on to list the mitzvah of Shemitah. And the Talmud was asking, why is Shemitah specifically linked to Sinai? As Rashi says, V'halo kol ha-mitzvos nemru mi Sinai. All the commandments were said at Sinai. So why does the Torah specify that Shemitah was said at Sinai? And therefore, Rashi says, quoting the Gemara, the Torah here is actually providing an extremely important message. And that is that just as Shemitah, says the Rashi, just as Shemitah, all of it, which the Torah is about to describe, not just in general principle, but in great detail. And the Torah says the following, all of the details which we're about to tell you were at Mount Sinai. So just as Shemitah, its general principles, as well as its details, and all of its finer details were all said to us at Sinai, giving it the power of Sinai. When we think of Sinai, we think of divine revelation, that they were divinely given with all of the power and spiritual truth of Sinai. Af Kulan, this serves as a example of all mitzvahs, that all mitzvahs were given at Sinai, not just that the general mitzvah was given at Sinai, but every detail and minor detail was given at Sinai. In other words, that all of the details of every mitzvah were given at Sinai. That which was Torah Shebiksa, that which was the written Torah, and that which was the oral Torah, all given at Sinai. Now, if we are to be more accurate, It's not as if every part of Jewish observance was given at Sinai. There are some areas of Jewish observance which were developed later. I mean, there's certain holidays which were developed later. The holiday of Purim, the holiday of Hanukkah, the fact that we celebrated Lag BaOmer yesterday, that did not come from Sinai. Those are ideas which were developed later. But the observance of mitzvahs and the details which the sages say were built into the mitzvah, even if they were not clearly expressed in Torah, expressed as Sinai, these are all given at Sinai. Rashi then goes on to explain further, elaborate further on this idea, but the essential point is the first few lines of Rashi, which is that the reason the Torah chose one mitzvah, a mitzvah which has many details, and said and expresses all these details, and clearly says these details were mentioned at Sinai to tell you this is the rule for all mitzvahs of the Torah. That any mitzvah that you come across which has general idea and as well as many details and finer details, recognize that they all come from God at Sinai. The same God who spoke to the entire Jewish nation and said, I am the Lord your God. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Also said the very smallest detail within the observance of every mitzvah, and it all came and has the same power of Sinai. Fine. Now, with that being said, let's move on a little bit to the mitzvah. Dabar Bnei Yisrael, speak to Jewish people and tell them that when they enter the land, v'shavsa haaretz Shabbos laHashem, when they arrive, the Jewish people should rest, a year of rest. Now, this is actually an interesting question, which is debated among the Talmudic sages, and that is, when was the first Shemitah? When was the first Shemitah? And you have a difference of opinion. There's a machlokas. Some say that, because if you look at verses 2 and then 3 and 4, there seems to be a contradiction. If you look at verse number 2, the indication very clearly is that as soon as you arrive in the land of Israel, you should celebrate Shemitah. Ki savo ala aretz. When you come to the land that I am giving you, land should rest. The Shabbos Hashem. You should come to that land, and then immediately you should have a Shemitah year. That's what Pasuk Beis seems to indicate. Pasuk Gimel and Daled, though, 3 and 4 says, sow your field for 6 years. 6 years prune your vineyard. And then on the 7th year, there shall be a rest. So which was it? Was it year number 1 that was Shemitah, or year number 7 that was Shemitah? The Talmud brings up the following interesting scenario. What if you're walking in the forest and you get lost for days and weeks? And this is in the olden days where you didn't have connection to the outside world. Perhaps it can exist today too. What if you get so confused over the course of time that one day you wake up and you realize, I have no idea what day of the week it is. You want to observe Shabbos, but there's no way to know when Shabbos is. So when should you observe Shabbos in that scenario? Anybody want to take a guess? Unmute yourself and try to answer that question. When should you observe Shabbos? You have no idea. You wake up and you don't know what day it is. So which day should you celebrate Shabbos?
Right away.
Okay, right away, says Ari.
I would say the 7th day.
The 7th day. Oh, look at that. Just a second. Let me take some. So as it turns out, Ari and Maishi, you both of you can pat yourself on the back because both of you gave an opinion with it, which is expressed in the Talmud. One says celebrate Shabbos and then count 6 days. The other says no, count 6 days, celebrate Shabbos. Yes, Yitzchak, you had a thought to share?
A Jew will always know when Shabbos is, so you're just gonna have a feeling of when it's Shabbos.
You want to know something? You want to know something it's very fascinating you bring that up because there's a story attached to that Gemara. The story is, and right now the name of the people doesn't slips my mind, but it was a great tzaddik, a Hasidic sage, and he was teaching this Gemara to his child who was, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. And he taught the Gemara to the child. And his child said, I don't understand the Gemara. And his father explained it again. He says, you're stuck in the forest, in the desert. You've been wandering around. And Shabbos says, the kid says, I don't get it. He says, what don't you get? He says, well, you walk outside. If it's Shabbos, you know it's Shabbos. How could you not know? So literally exactly what you're saying. Yitzchak is exactly a Chassidic story which is said, and the child said it with absolute certainty that there's no way you could go outside and not know when it's Shabbos. Either way,
we just recreated the whole sugya in
exactly.
real time.
See, each person gave an answer. Two people gave the answers within the Talmud. One gave a Chassidic story connected to the Talmud. There you go. So anyway, the point over here is the same disagreement exists in the Talmud about which day to celebrate Shabbos exists about the Shemitah thing. One opinion, the Gemara says from the verses you could learn that you celebrate Shemitah the first year you enter the land of Israel. The other opinion says no, take verses 3 and 4, and those are the ones which you should focus on. And really Shemitah, which perhaps is more logical. Shemitah is the result of 6 years of work, and that's the 7th year should be Shemitah. Okay, I want to get to a Kabbalistic idea, as I said earlier. And this is from the Zohar on this Parsha. And it's a little bit further in the Parsha. Let me see. Chapter 25, verse number 20. So we're going to go a little bit further over here. Third Aliyah. Wait, what? Let's go back. Chapter, right. That's what's going on. Let's go. Chapter 25. Here you are. V'chi noimru. Now, this is the question. The Torah is almost, the Torah is recognizing the challenge of Shemitah. And the Torah says, V'chi nomru, and if you should say, Ma nomar b'shana shvi'is, what will we eat in the 7th year? Hein loy nizra, we will not sow. V'lo nesof as v'oseinu, we will not gather our produce. In other words, a farmer may say, how am I supposed to survive when you tell me to take a year off? This is actually very unusual that the Torah initiates the crisis of faith that someone may have. Many mitzvahs have challenges. The Torah doesn't say this about Shabbos. The Torah doesn't say, if you're going to ask, how can I keep Shabbos? I'm not going to be able to hold on my job. How can I give tzedakah? I'm not going to be able to support myself. How can I keep kosher? I won't have what to eat. In other words, there's many mitzvahs which require some level of sacrifice. And yet some of the Torah takes the sacrifice of Shemitah more seriously. So much so the Torah initiates the problem, the question you may have. In a way, it almost like justifies the question and the farmer's concern and worry more so than the worry over the observance of other mitzvahs. Nonetheless, what does the Torah say? Verse number 21, if you are worried, perhaps justifiably so, because the pasuk supports that worry or gives room for that worry. It says pasuk 21, V'tzivisi es birchasi lachem b'shana hashishis. I will command my blessing for you in the 6th year, and it will yield produce for 3 years. God says, I will give you extra blessing in year number 6 so that you can survive through year number 7. And even year number 8, when you get back to the field, you still have enough produce back from year number 6 to continue to survive on. Let's take a moment to, this in itself is a beautiful, powerful pasuk. But let's go take this a step further and look into the Zohar on this. Says the Zohar, Rabbi Yehuda focused on this verse and derived some very profound ideas over here. Rabbi Yehuda, who was a contemporary of Rabbi Shimon. Some of you may be familiar with the story of Rabbi Shimon living in a cave for 13 years. That story begins with a conversation that he has with Rabbi Yehuda. Be that as it may, Rabbi Yehuda began the conversation the following. Betach ba Hashem v'asei tov shchona eretz u're'ei emunah. Says Rabbi Yehuda, la'olam yehe adam zahir b'kono. A person should always be very careful in the relationship with their creator. V'yedabek libo, and one should connect one's heart be'emunah ha'elyono with lofty faith. Kadeshi yehe shalem bekono, so that a person can have that complete connection with God. Because, says Rabbi Yehuda, when a person has that complete faith and connection with God, lo yuchlu lahara lo kol bnei ha'olam, no one can harm such a person. And therefore he explains that what does it mean? Betach ba Hashem va'aseito, have faith in God and do good. He translates, mystically speaking, your good actions below initiate the good actions above. This becomes an idea that is often repeated in the Zohar. Your actions below trigger a reaction from above. And therefore he links it to the following. And it's a long Zohar here, but I want to kind of I want to focus on he says like this. When a person, he gives several examples of this idea. One of them is charity. When a person gives charity, instead of making the calculation, how can I give today? What will I have tomorrow? Which is basically the same idea as the question of the farmer over here. How can I sacrifice working in the field in the 7th year? How will I survive in the 8th year? Or how can I give up my work in the 7th year? How will I survive in the 7th year? Your sacrifice, your faith ensures the blessing that the pasuk tells us. The vitzivisi es birchasi, the blessing in verse number 21, that God says, I will command my blessing upon you, is a response to your faith. If you have faith and commitment that you are going to let the land rest, if that faith is strong enough, God says that faith causes a response to me, that my blessing will dwell upon you in the 7th year. That faith of giving. And the same idea that we described for the Shemitah year, that the year number, that when you have year number 6 of faith, it leads to your preparation for Shemitah, leads to the blessing that God's going to give. The same is true about Friday and Shabbos. The effort, Friday is day number 6, Shabbos is day number 7. If you prepare for Shabbos, if you show faith in Hashem, that already on Friday, you're getting ready for the day of rest. You're preparing for the day of rest. You're preparing for that connection to Hashem. God says, then I will provide blessing in the 7th day. The blessing of 7 is a reaction to the faith we have in 6. That God's blessing of Shabbos is the response to the faith of 6. 6 represents our faith and our act of giving, and 7 is the divine response of blessing in response to number 6. In the Sfirot, and this is actually appropriate because we are about to head into the 6th week of Sfira. Today's Sfira, in the counting of the Omer, today is Yesod Shebahod. Tonight is going to be the 7th quality of the 5th Sfira, which means that starting tomorrow night, Thursday night, we enter the 6th week of Sfira. What is the 6th week of Sfira? Is Yesod. Yesod, which means foundation. And what is that characteristic of Yesod, of foundation? So it says Yesod, which means foundation, really means it's when we begin the process of conveying all of our qualities to someone else. Yesod is connected to charity. Yesod, it says, which great figure in history was connected to Yesod? Yosef. Yosef was Yesod. What was Yosef's great quality? Yosef fed, firstly, he fed his brothers. Secondly, he fed an entire nation, the nation of Egypt. Thirdly, we know that the entire world went to Egypt for sustenance, which is why the brothers went down from Canaan to Egypt. So Yosef represents sustenance to others. That's the quality of Yesod. Yesod is when I take all of the previous characteristics, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzachod, which is my spiritual makeup, the makeup of my personality, my character, and I ask myself, how do I then convey that to others? So we see again, the number 6 is about giving, is about faith, both about tzedakah, giving to someone else. It's also about the Friday, the preparation for Shabbos, in which I designate and I'm preparing to give a day to Hashem. It's about the 6th year, the farmer preparing to give his field to Hashem. 7 represents the divine response. 7 represents the idea of God's responding. Shabbos is the response to my efforts leading up to Shabbos. The Gemara says, Kol hatoreach be'erev Shabbos yochel b'Shabbos. Whoever puts an effort on Friday will be rewarded on Shabbos. And you see over here, God says, if the farmer in year number 6 is ready, if the farmer is going to commit to keeping Shemitah in year number 6, and therefore do the effort in year number 6, God says year number 7 will be the blessing of Shemitah. Already year number 6, I'll provide blessing to provide for year 6, 7, and 8. So Kabbalistically, this idea that the Torah says over here, God says, I will respond with added blessing, is replicated not just in the Shemitah year, it's replicated every Friday and Shabbos, and it's replicated in every act of charity we do. Charity and Erev Shabbos is all connected to the effort on our end. That's all indicated in the number 6. And the number 7 is the divine response, is the holiness of Shabbos, the holiness of Shemitah, the holiness of the blessing, which God responds to our efforts and our faith and our giving that we do. And true, all 3 mitzvahs, tzedakah, Shemitah, and Shabbos, all are connected to faith in Hashem. You can only give tzedakah properly via faith in Hashem. You can only observe Shabbos properly with faith in Hashem. And certainly Shemitah is perhaps the ultimate test of faith. You can only observe Shemitah with faith in Hashem. So the faith is the number 6. The 7 is the response that God gives us, the blessing and response that God gives us. And this is how the Zohar explains this blessing and how we could implement this not just once every 7 years in Israel, but every week. And every time we give tzedakah, we are then initiating the bracha which is alluded to in source number in Pasuk 21 of chapter 25 of this week's Parsha, the TVCS Brachas. All right, with that, I conclude the my portion of the class. And at this point, I want to share a very profound video which shares a powerful story. I actually heard this story, but today I said, let me just do some research to confirm the validity of the story. And as it turns out, there's a beautiful 4-minute video which tells the story with the characters, with all the details. So I'm going to turn it over to the video now. Enjoy the video. Hopefully you can see and hear. And let's do this.
If there was ever a picture in the dictionary of a Jewish farmer, it would be Ira Zimmerman.
From very, very young age, I was going to work with my father in the fields. I was driving the tractor, and this is the way of living.
Because he grew up without a Torah education, without mitzvahs, without Shabbos, he has a passion for using his farming skills to promote Torah and mitzvahs, which is why he volunteers to harvest the wheat for Matzah Shmura every year. And he also volunteers a ton of his time and efforts for Keren HaShvius, an organization that helps farmers keep the laws of Shemitah.
I feel it's like Baal Tshuva is making a tshuva on the thing he did before.
7 years ago was the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle. It turns out that year, it rained in Israel very late in the harvesting season.
All the center of Israel was not good for the Matzah Shmura, and also the north was raining this year. So only what we have to do is to go to the south of Israel.
Fortunately, Ira and his friends found a field in the south of Israel, next to the Gaza border. Only problem was, no farmer wants to work in a field next to the Gaza border. The tension between Israel and Gaza was palpable. They were at the brink of war.
But then, because I grew up this region, so I know the region. I know it's a little bit hot, a little bit risky. Sometimes they shoot, sometimes they throw stones. So okay, let's do it and keep going. The problem is that the kibbutznik, the farmer, says you can't take it now, it's not ready yet, it's still a little bit green. You need to wait another 1.5, 2 weeks. And we tell them, look, we don't wait. This next year is Shemitah. We need to have double of the amounts. We can't take the risk another rain will come. We need to take it now.
They worked overtime from dawn till dusk, from sunrise till sunset. They tried their best to do it as fast as possible because they didn't want rain to ruin any of their chances to take the wheat to be used for Matzah Shmura. In addition, they needed double the amount of wheat they would usually harvest because the next year was Shemitah.
We need to take double, so it's 3,000 tons.
While they were on the field on the tractor, Ira remembers his partner saying to him, Ira, I can feel that the ground beneath us is shaking. It feels kind of unstable.
But it wasn't like something which is not usual because it's a field, it's a big tractor. You have rocks, you have holes.
And within 2 to 3 days, they managed to harvest the entire field. They sent shiploads of the wheat to all the major cities in Israel for those bakeries to have for Matzah Shmura and also to store for the next Pesach for Shemitah. 2 days later, it was all over the news.
חדשות הערב, מאולפני כאן בירושלים.
כך זה נראה לפני זמן קצר, בשטח המנהרה בה נתפסו 13 המחבלים שניסו להיכנס לקיבוץ סופה.
The terrorists from the Hamas, they were digging a tunnel in the ground and they come up exactly where we are working with the combine for the Matzah Shmura.
They were hoping that the wheat that had ripened and grew in that field would cover them. But because Ira and his partner risked their lives, they worked overtime to harvest every strand of wheat for Matzah Shmura and to store for the next year Shemitah. The terrorists were exposed right away.
The Israeli IDF was able to see them in the camera and straight away they were able to kill them.
There's only one mitzvah in the Torah where Hashem gives an explicit promise of Etzivisias Berchasi, that he will enforce his blessing unto those who keep the mitzvah of Shemitah.
This is the Ashgacha of the Shem Yitbarach. Have the possibility to keep Shemitah, which made this miracle to happen.
All right. With that, we'll conclude today's class. The powerful blessing of Etzivisias Berchasi, the tremendous bracha of Hashem, which again is literally speaking about the mitzvah of Shemitah, but on a more mystical level, it applies to the Friday dedication we make to Shabbos, and even the dedication that we make, dedication of faith we make when giving tzedakah as well. Okay.